All My Life by the Foo Fighters. A great lesson in hitting the drums really hard, but with absolute control. So let's get into it. As I've already mentioned, these lessons aren't specifically note-by-note tutorials for these songs. If you want that, feel free to check out other tutorials on YouTube. If you want the full transcription, however, it is available below. What we really are going to look at in this song is how to hit the drums hard. We're going to look at the technical aspects that will give you a convincing performance of the song in a pinch. So let's do it. What I really want to emphasize here is being loud and powerful on the drums does not mean you lose control or time. There is a skill to that and also a certain level of fitness and stamina. But most of all, it's technique. So let me show you a couple of things. First of all, a good rim shot. Being able to wallop these drums is a skill that you're gonna need. If you're gonna be copying Taylor Hawkins, if you're gonna be copying Dave Grohl, this is a really useful skill to have. So a rim shot you get by hitting the center of the drum and also the edge at the same time. Takes a little bit of practice, but once you got it in your muscle memory, it's there forever and you will overuse them, probably forever. You're welcome for that. However, you don't need to use a lot of force to get these drums to sound really loud. It's about technique. To me, I think of this as the whipping motion. It's stick control, basically. You want to go up with the stick, let your hand open, but don't lose your grip between your thumb and your forefinger. So you come up, imagine you're lifting from the wrist, flip it back, open the hand, and bring it down. A little bit of elbow involved, but not lots. And close your hand. It's like you're almost whacking like a tennis ball, maybe. Just make sure you hit the thing. But make sure there is a certain amount of flow going on. The wrist part is really important. So up, whip it back, open the hand, whip it forward as you bring it down. It's not just the elbow or the arm. Try your best also, as we get faster and are playing more notes throughout the song, try not to tense up, try and relax. This is, again, where stick control plays a huge part because you want to be engaging your fingers for speed and not the rest of you. Take single strokes, for example. If you're engaging just the wrist, tenses the whole thing. If you engage the fingers, much, much, much easier. I've talked about this in loads of videos at this point. The links for those will be down below. Key aspect of this first section, once we actually get into playing the drums, nice and hard, nice and loud, remember those rim shots, but also slightly trashy hats. Trashy hats means slightly open, like that. And also, really key important part is those offbeat crashes that happen at the end of the phrase. That's a really key bit. You could probably make up to a certain extent the rest of it, but as long as you get those crashes in, it will sound vaguely convincing, especially if you're putting a lot of attitude behind it and performance as you're doing it. Another thing throughout the song, there's a lot of bass drum going on. So I suggest you look at your bass drum technique. If you're straining any point throughout your leg, take a look at what's going on. So a lot of people when they start out have their heel down. Can work for a lot of situations, especially if you want softer hits and more control. However, we're going to start lifting up the heel, maybe move the foot back a little bit and utilizing the spring. The spring that we've got down here. A little bit more control. If you want to practice at first, just getting consistent eighth notes instead of... Let's just get consistent eighth notes first. I think of this as a two-part motion again. So I'm using more of my toes for the first hit and then bringing the ball of my foot down for the second one. Always utilizing the weight of my leg as well to do it. Especially when we're doing these runs of three. I do move from different parts of my foot. So we're using the spring and also moving our foot ever so slightly. There are other ways of doing this. This is just the way I do it. Let's jump now straight ahead to the chorus groove. It's probably one of the most recognizable bits as well. It's a little tricky, so it's definitely worth taking the time to get down. The main thing I'd point out here, especially if you've never done any ride bell patterns before, is just making sure you're hitting the ride bell properly. What I do, especially to get this initial hit nice and solid, is actually hit the ride bell with the shoulder of the stick and hit anything that isn't with the tip of the stick on top of the ride cymbal. Just make sure there's a proper definition between those two notes. It's important to make sure that control and that muscle memory is there before we start trying to do all the complex technical stuff as well. So in this groove, for example, you end up with this kind of pattern. It's really worth practicing that pattern before you try and add everything else in, getting that subtle coordination down before we get everything else. So I am going to break this down very, very slowly. Again, if you want a way more in-depth tutorial on this, feel free to check them out on YouTube. But if you want to follow along with the real score or the real song, check out the link below. The timestamp is just here. Am I going to read it? Yes, I am. Because this is actually pretty tricky, believe it or not. I want to make sure I get this right, because I play this completely different. I've been making this up my entire life. So don't feel too bad if you're also doing that, because I was always doing... I think I may have been overcomplicating and also undercomplicating it at the same time. Alas, what is actually on the sheet music is this. First 2 beats we're going to go. Next 2 beats. And the last bar is plain sailing. Carry on grooving or play some kind of fill. There's lots of different variations through the song, but it's a pretty tricky lick to get down. So I suggest you take lots of time with it, use a metronome with it, take it nice and slow and gradually speed it up. Don't try and jump straight into this, because it's almost like the equivalent of a tongue twister, but for your brain and your hands and with drums involved somehow. So just to break this down one more time and apply what I'm saying about the bass drum, the outro is pretty full on because we got a lot of bass drums and a lot of energy going on as well. Then you open the hi-hat just a little bit trashy. We do have a little bit of a build-up. Make sure you make that a nice crescendo as well. Always helps if you put tiny crescendos within other sections that are already building with intensity. Just sounds really cool, honestly. But yes, lots of bass drums heading towards the end, so make sure you consciously think to relax. It sometimes helps, especially if you're following along with the score. If you want it, remember, the link's below. You can always write on these scores and say, relax. You will ignore your notes, but at least you wrote them on there. Either way, that's all the things I'd pay attention to in this chart if I was trying to learn it in a pinch. Hopefully that's helped you too, and I will see you in another video. Big love. Hello everybody, this is Emma from the future, telling you that there are more videos like the one you just watched about more famous songs. So if you want to check that out, the playlist is here. Enjoy.